Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And welcome to another Feminist Around the World. And again, we're going to go ahead and put our caveats at the top. Pronunciation, we're trying our best. Some of the things are kind of a struggle. Again, we are U.S. citizens and myself who is really trying to figure out these pronunciations. So if we say a name wrong, whatever, organization wrong, please let us know because we do want to correct it. But know that we did try to research and trying our damnedest. And I have discovered when it comes to languages, when your technique and accent skills are specific to one area and you don't travel often into these other areas with very differing languages, your muscle memory / mouth muscles can't form some words that I really wish I could. I wish I was that fluent. It's kind of like the rolling of the R's. I can't do it well. I figured this out. And as I'm trying to learn Korean, I can't do the back of the throat throttle that they do in some of their words. I'm sad about that. But just put that at the top here, as well as the fact I am going to absolutely be transparent with y'all when I say, when it comes to conflicts around the world, I am naive. There are a few things that I do know of, and we have been very, very, very much so blinded by our own teachings, especially here in the U.S., especially here in the South, in which we were not taught things correctly, and or we have been ignorant and or taught misinformation a lot. I think we've talked about that a lot. I love that we have social media now to learn a little more depth of it. And I am very proud of the fact that our younger generations are understanding that. As a person who was an ex-millennial, I have found my group of people. I understand that I do not completely understand what has happened and what is continuing to happen all around the world. And that includes, again, from my own country, home country of Korea. I just learned some new facts that I'm like, why didn't I know this in the establishment of North Korea? I was like, wow, this has a lot to do with U.S. military dictation that I had no idea. Dictatorship, essentially, in its own matter. And I'm like, my mind is blown. Let's just say that. But as we try to continue to highlight things around the world, and as we are teaching ourselves, I'm learning myself, I have realized it will take another 2 semesters, if not 4 years, of trying to study what is happening in the conflicts and to get to the nitty-gritty and to get to the understanding and the backgrounds of some of the atrocities that have happened and continue to happen. So I'm going to put that at this top. As we are speaking and highlighting these activists, please know if something is misarticulated or something is out of frame in timelines. We are doing our best. Please correct us, though, because we don't want to stay on that misinformation, obviously, including the fact that one of the articles on here says a 2011 timeline, and then you go to her actual site, the activist's actual site, and it has a 2010. But then I kind of go back and forth, and I think actually her website might be off because of the articles that were written. But, and again, that's 13 years ago, so more than a decade, just as a reminder. So, but that does not stop us from highlighting the amazing activists, because that shouldn't stop us just because we are afraid that we might be off with just some of the information. So again, if y'all have more information and would like to tell us more, please do. All right, so let's jump into it. So we're talking about the first Arab woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize, Tawakkul Karmān, and she was also the youngest at the time to win the Nobel Peace Prize. This was in 2011, as well as the fact I believe she was the second Muslim woman to actually win as well. So a lot of firsts for her, or at least close to. And Karmān is a Yemeni activist who has been working for the rights and nonviolent resistance for women's rights and freedoms for her community. Along with her works as an advocate, Karmān is also a journalist and writer and has learned a lot from her own family, who are very politically involved. Her father served as a minister of legal affairs in the late 80s and early 90s in her country.
And after earning her degrees, she quickly became active in political activism within her country. Here's a bit about her from Britannica.com. Karmān graduated from the University of Science and Technology in Sana'a with a degree in commerce in 1999 and later earned a master's degree in political science. After completing her education, Karmān began a career in journalism, writing articles, producing documentary films, and disseminating news alerts via text messages. When she encountered restrictions and threats from the Yemeni government, Karmān and several of her colleagues founded Women Journalists Without Chains in 2005 to advocate for women's rights, civil rights, and freedom of expression.
So here's a bit from her own site, tawakkulkarman.net, talking about the Women Journalists Without Chains. Quote, in 2005, she founded Women Journalists Without Chains to advocate for freedom of the press and worked as a campaigning journalist reporting on government injustice and human rights issues, including malnutrition and illiteracy among girls. In 2005, Karmān was one of 8 female journalists who founded the human rights group Women Journalists Without Chains. The group promoted press freedom and mobile phone news services, which were tightly controlled.
And here's some more information from her bio in the noblewomensinitiative.org. Quote, a journalist by profession and human rights activist by nature, Tawakkul responded to the political instability and human rights abuses in Yemen by mobilizing others and reporting on injustices. In 2005, she founded the organization Women Journalists Without Chains, WJWC, which advocates for rights and freedoms and provides media skills to journalists. In addition, the organization produces regular reports on human rights abuses in Yemen, documenting more than 50 cases of attacks and unfair sentences against newspapers and writers to date. With all of these abuses and unfair treatment against the press and journalists, Karmān began organizing sit-ins and demonstrations to protest the government. Here's some more information from that Britannica profile. Quote, in 2007, Karmān began staging weekly sit-ins in Sana'a to demand a variety of democratic reforms. She continued the practice for several years and was arrested multiple times for her activism. Although Karmān was a senior member of the Islah Reform Party, Yemen's main Islamist opposition party, she occasionally clashed with the party's religious conservatives. In 2010, for example, she criticized members of her own party for opposing legislation to raise the legal marriage age for women to 17.
So in 2011, Karmān was still organizing sit-ins and protests, including for students around the areas, and she was a target for the government for her continued work. In January of 2011, she and her family were stopped by plainclothes officers and taken to prison for 36 hours. And it was this action that many really saw what was happening with Karmān and her work in protest. So here's a quote that she had written and published in April 2011 in a Guardian article about the situation. And yes, we're pretty much reading 2 articles that she had written soon after. So we're going to be reading this and a New York Times article. And we're doing a big chunk because I think it's important that you hear her words, that we all hear her words, rather. So the revolution in Yemen began immediately after the fall of Ben Ali in Tunisia on January 14th. As I always do when arranging a demonstration, I posted a message on Facebook calling on people to celebrate the Tunisian uprising on 16th of January. The following day, a group of students from Sana'a University asked me to attend a vigil in front of the Tunisian embassy. The crowd was shouting, "Heroes, we are with you in the line of fire against the evil rulers." We were treated roughly by the security forces, and we chanted, "If one day a people desires to live, then destiny will answer their call, and the night must come to an end," the mantra of the revolutionaries in Tunisia. The demonstration was astonishing. Thousands turned up, and Sanaa witnessed its first peaceful demonstration of the overthrow of the regime. "Go before you are driven out," we cried. The night student and youth leaders visited me, along with the human rights activist Ahmed Saif Hashid and the writer Abdul Bari Tahir. We agreed that we would not let this historic moment pass us by, and that we too could spark a peaceful revolution to demand an end to the despotic regime. We decided there was to be no backing down despite the repression we knew would come. The rallies grew daily, even though the government deployed thugs against us. After a week of protests, I was detained by the security forces in the middle of the night. This has to become a defining moment in the Yemeni revolution. Media outlets reported my detention, and demonstrations erupted in most provinces of the country. They were organized by students, civil society activists, and politicians. The pressure on the government was intense, and I was released after 36 hours in a women's prison where I was kept in chains. After my release, I continued to demonstrate. Invitations were sent to all parties, including the people of the South, the Houthis in the North, the tribes, trade unions, civil society organizations, and the army, to join the peaceful student revolution and demand an end to the regime.
And in June that same year, she went on to publish another article in the New York Times titled Yemen's Unfinished Revolution, where she writes, "After more than 5 months of continuous protest, I stand today in Change Square with thousands of young people united by a lofty dream. I have spent days and nights camped out in tents with fellow protesters. I have led demonstrations in the streets, facing the threat of mortars, missiles, and gunfire. I have struggled to build a movement for democratic change, all while caring for my 3 young children. We have reached this historic moment because we chose to march in the streets, demanding the resignation of President Ali Abdullah Saleh, an end to his corrupt and failed regime, and the establishment of a modern democratic state. On June 4th, our wish for Mr. Saleh's departure was granted, but our demand for democracy remains unfulfilled. Following months of peaceful protests that reached every village, neighborhood, and street, Yemen is now facing a complete vacuum of authority. We are without a president or a parliament. Mr. Saleh may be gone, but authority has not yet been transferred to a transitional presidential council endorsed by the people."
So in the article, she continues to implore outside governments to intervene and essentially the mess that they helped cause that were killing and violating the Yemeni citizens. And yeah, I would encourage everyone to go to either one of these articles or both of these articles. You can actually, she does have a Wikipedia page, and there are links to that New York Times article as well as a Guardian article where she talks about what is happening and what is needed and who she's calling out. And of course, the U.S. is a part of that. And I feel like that's a big key proponent to a majority of these conflicts. We'll just keep that right there. I'm on a list. I am definitely on a list.
I've been on a list since 8th grade.
But just how deeply it's going and what they need and what they're calling out and their own history behind who is putting these people in power and for what reason. And I think it's really important that we keep talking about it because these conflicts are still happening. So during these long protests and demonstrations, Karmān would continue to call for peaceful protests, even saying, quote, "With nonviolence, the journey to freedom is less bloody and more guaranteed." Of course, yes, and there was a lot of violence happening against them, including people dying during demonstrations. So her tireless work and fighting still continues as she travels around the world, speaking and advocating for peace and human rights and protections for her people and all people. And of course, along with her Nobel Peace Prize, she has many other accolades under her name. She has a documentary of her, I believe, titled The Screams, which talk about the women's revolt in 2011. And from her site, it says, quote, "She has received various awards and accolades, which includes one of Time Magazine's Most Rebellious Women in History in 2011, one of Foreign Policy Magazine's Top 100 Global Thinkers for 3 years, one of CNN's list of Most Powerful Women in the Arab World. Tawakkul has been selected for international powerful positions, member of the United Nations High-Level Panel of Eminent Persons on Post-2015 Development, member of Transparency International's Advisory Council, and many international NGOs. I actually did listen to one of her speeches happening in the United States recently as well. And I think it's also good to note, while she was attending lecturing for University of North Dakota in 2023, so just last year, a student asked her what advice she would offer to the next generation of people aspiring to affect meaningful change. And she said, "You are strong enough to do very big things. Believe in your goals, believe in yourself. If you dream what you want and make your dream bold, there is no fear of consequence. And always, always search for the truth." And yeah, with that, we are here and supporting our fellow young people and those out there protesting and using their rights and being peaceful protesters, and know that we are thinking of you and we applaud what you are doing.
Yes, and if any listeners have any information about this or anybody else we should talk about, please let us know. You can write to us at stephanie@momstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff One Never Told You. Also on YouTube. We have a TeePublic store and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer Christina, our executive producer Maya, and our contributor Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.